Hey everyone, Kyle returning for this week for video game discussions. This week's topic, Final Fantasy Versus 13 and the Fabula Nova Crystallis series. Before I begin with Versus in the Fabula series, I have to take you back to the beginning. In the 1980s, there was a Japanese gaming industry called Square that was developing Japanese real-time strategy games. Within that company, there was a man named Hironobu Sakaguchi that was developing what might be his last game at the company if the game did not sell well. The project was led by 6 other staff members who were working with Sakaguchi on the project. In December of 1987, Sakaguchi's Final Fantasy was released in Japan. After doing so well in Japan, the game was released in North America, where it did equally as well. Due to the popular mythology of this game, several sequels would come to the future of gaming. Although Final Fantasy was not technically the first JRPG to be created, it did revolutionize JRPGs with its mythology, gameplay, interesting characters, and outstanding stories. Now, the first Final Fantasy game I have played was Final Fantasy IV, or 2 in the US. After being intrigued with Final Fantasy IV, I decided to give the rest of the series a chance. My next game was Final Fantasy VI, or 3 in the US, and then Final Fantasy VII, and so on and so on. The stories, gameplay, characters, and mythos of 4, 6, and 7 are also tied for my greatest games I have ever played in my life. When the mid-2000s came along, Square was acting under a new name called Squaresoft and developed a 10th game in the series. This would be, however, the last great game of Final Fantasy I would ever play in a while. From then on, Squaresoft would merge with Enix to become Square Enix, and follow up with disappointing Final Fantasy titles, one after the other. After playing Final Fantasy X, I was not impressed with Final Fantasy XI, being an MMORPG, or Final Fantasy XII. So I waited for the next time Square Enix would announce their next Final Fantasy, and try to be impressed with it once again. At E3 2006, they announced 3 separate titles as part of one project, the Fabula Nova Crystallis series, or Tale of the New Crystals in Latin. Now, 2 of these titles caught my attention. The first one was Final Fantasy Versus 13, and the other was Final Fantasy Type 0. These titles were actions RPGs and seemed very dark from their previous Final Fantasy titles, which instantly made me want to buy them. The final game in the project was just 13, and being a big Final Fantasy fan, I decided to buy it. However, not knowing the disappointments that were held in this game. From the start of 13, I loved it, but as I continued to play through it, it started to create nothing but disgust in my heart. Before I can go into depth of how disappointing a game 13 was, I need to discuss what makes a Final Fantasy game a Final Fantasy game. When someone says Final Fantasy, what do other people think of? What I immediately think of is an open world adventure, battles that make you think on how to win, develop characters, and strong story. Final Fantasy 13 has none of these. Instead, 13 has a poor story, uninteresting or annoying characters, and awful gameplay. Special criticism is reserved for its linearity and battle system. Every Final Fantasy I played has been open world exploring, but this Final Fantasy just moved from point A to point B and offers little to no side quests. As for the battle system, previous titles would have you think carefully on how to win battles, but instead here we get just pressing the X or A button for an auto battle. Where is the fun or strategy in just pressing one button? The characters, they range from passable to awfully annoying. I like Sazh, as he was the first African American in a Final Fantasy title, and Vanille for her energy. Lightning, the protagonist, is boring. Fans of Lightning, yeah, I can't believe she actually has fans, claim her to be a feminine version of Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII. That is crap. Cloud is a much more developed and complex character than she is. Cloud lost both his village and his family to the man he looked up to his entire life. Both he and his best friends were experimented on like plaything. He also lost his best friend while they were trying to escape these horrible experiments. Once he did find a love interest, the exact same man that took his mother and village killed her. On the verge of snapping, he still manages to keep his priorities straight and put a stop to this madman's plan while constantly being taunted on how he was puppet to this man's will. This is my definition of a game hero. Fighting for justice and to get revenge as long as they can cope with their grief and move on. Lightning is just a soldier with nothing to fight for. She claims to be a tool of the government, but there's only one problem. The game did not even show this, which does not make her a complex character in the least. The only priority she has is saving her sister. Hope? I can't believe the character's name is actually called Hope. Is really, really annoying. And I can't even describe the rest of the cast because they were so bland. As soon as I finished this game, it was more like finishing a chore than the actual game. Now, in last week's podcast, I stated that a title does not need a sequel unless if it is set up for one. 13 is a perfect example of this. It ended on a decent note, everything went back to normal, and peace returned. With that game done, I was patiently waiting for Versus and Type 0. I also forgot to mention the abomination that was known as Final Fantasy XIV. It was another MMORPG, and it was so bad, so flawed, that Square Enix officially apologized to their customers and decided to redo the whole game all over again. So, yet again, something not important was delaying both Versus and Type 0. No info about Versus would come until 2011 and 2012. Did they announce a release date? Nope. All we got for 2011 was a trailer for Versus with voice acting, which looked fantastic. It made me angrier that this game was still not out. What about Type 0? Well, it was finally released in October of 2011. The only problem is, that was in Japan! To this day, they have not released both titles in the US or Europe, while Final Fantasy XIII 2 was announced and released on December of 2011. I did not even bother with this one because it was the same linear, boring auto crap from the first game. But my real horror came at the end of this game. I was watching a YouTube clip about the ending, and it ended on a cliffhanger. I just thought, no, it can't be. They can't be stupid enough to do it. As much as I tried to deny it, my nightmare finally became a reality when they announced Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy XIII on September 1st of 2012. And yes, this would be released before Versus in Type 0. I repeat, before Versus and Type 0. From this moment, I was on the verge of losing my patience with this company. At least some good news came on February 20th, 2013. It was Sony's press conference in which they finally revealed their PlayStation 4, which I cannot wait to get. The conference had some cool presentation from other game companies such as Sucker Punch's infamous title. Little did I know that Square Enix themselves decided to attend the event. They showed a tech demo that was already shown 2 years ago displaying what their new game engine would look like. I was angry with that, but then Shinji Hashimoto took the stage. He was one of the main producers of Final Fantasy and decided he had to say something. At that point, I just thought, this is it. We get a review of Versus and maybe Type 0. His words were this: "We are preparing a Final Fantasy title for the PlayStation 4. Please be excited for E3 this year." And then Square left the stage. It was here I was no longer angry. I was raging at that statement. They spent how much on a plane ticket to fly across the world just to say that? Their performance at this event was terrible and pathetic. Not only did they waste our time, they wasted their time as well. Well, turns out there were other people who felt like me, although less angry, and decided to make a peaceful fan protest on Facebook. They are called Project Crystallis, and they are aiming to get info and a release date on both these titles. I urge you guys to check them out. Like them on Facebook, support them, and sign their petition. They are a great group of people, and you will have a lot of fun with their video streams. I guarantee that. But here's my biggest question of all. Who do I blame? After all these years, no info or release dates about these games, I have to ask, who is to blame for all this? Was it the company's former CEO, Yoichi Wada, for poor management and neglect for these two games? Is it the director of these 13 titles, Mamoru Toriyama, for making these games in the first place? Or should I blame the 13 fan base for keeping these bland, repetitive games from staying alive? Either way, both fans for Versus and Type 0 while the boring legacy of 13 lives on. Maybe since Wada stepped down, since the company was losing money, I can only imagine why, this new CEO will make things awesome again. Now, I'm curious to hear from you guys, if you agree with me, or I over-exaggerated. Until then, this is Kyle signing off. Hey everyone, one last thing. If you have any questions for me, you can email me at info.with.a.voice@gmail.com. I will try to answer any questions you guys have as soon as I can. Until then, Kyle signing off again.